What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I'll be setting up my fantasy cruncher for the Saturday night football game between the Chargers and the Jaguars. I'll be setting up here for the largest field GPP on FanDuel. While you're coming in, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and you can hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. We have a lot of great content on this channel. All right, first thing I'm going to do here is rearrange my columns. I have a quick view saved. Sort by projection, and I'm just going to remove every player who has a projection of 0 just to save myself some time. When I am making groups later, these players will no longer show up. Slow me down. All right, done with that. Next, I'm going to go into the MVP tab, and I'm going to set an exposure cap on all players of 20%. Nothing magic about this number. Just a good way to diversify your lineups, forcing in here at least 5 different MVPs in your lineups. It's not a magical number. Again, if you want to set it higher or lower, totally up to you. But this is going to force in at least 5 players to be used in the MVP spot. All right, now I'm going to go into advanced options. Here I'll be working in 2 tabs, the general tab and the groups tab. Starting here in the general tab, unique players per lineup, I'm going to leave at 1 unique player per lineup in a 150 set. If you are making 40 or fewer lineups, I would recommend changing this to 2 unique players just for the sake of diversifying your lineups. Salary cap, I'm not going to set a minimum. I will set a maximum just for the purpose of avoiding the most duplicated lineups. Typically, those most duplicated lineups are going to be the ones that use the full salary cap or very close to it. So I like to avoid those lineups. If I am lucky enough to win, I want to win a lot of money. I don't want to make lineups that, even if they get super lucky and win, they're only making like $1,000 or $2,000, something like that. I want to be making tens of thousands, ideally, when I win. So I want to make lineups that are not highly duplicated. And the easiest way to do that, in my opinion, is just to leave salary on the table. Offensive players versus defense, default is set to a max of 2 players. I'm going to change that to 4 so I can have 4 players from one team against just against the defense of the opposing team. We have seen it win this year. We saw it win at least once. Browns versus, I want to say Bengals. I don't remember the exact game. I think it was Browns-Bengals, 4 against the defense of the opposing team. So certainly can win, and I want to allow for it in my lineups. 100%, I'm going to leave global exposure cap here at 100%. I already changed it in the MVP spot to 20%. Randomness, I'm going to turn on to 30%. If you want more control over your lineups, set this number lower. You'll have more control. You can even turn off randomness. I know some players who don't use randomness at all, so that is viable, but I'm going to use 30%. Minimum projection included in calculation. The default is set to 3. I'm going to leave it at 3. And if there's a player who I want in my player pool who projects for fewer than 3 fantasy points, I'm just going to manually boost their projection above 3 fantasy points. And then players from each team max, I'm going to leave it 4 so I can have 4 players from one team against 1 on the opposing team. That's all I'm going to do here in the general tab. Next, I'm moving over to the groups tab, where I'm going to create some groups revolving around the quarterbacks, starting with a Justin Herbert MVP group. What am I doing here? Doing this wrong. All right, first I got to find Justin Herbert in the MVP spot, make him my key player. I was meaning to type that in here. Label this one Herbert MVP. All right, so now we've got Justin Herbert in the MVP spot. I'm going to sort by position and add all of these Chargers pass catchers to a secondary group. All right, so for this group, I am going to leave the rules just as it is. If any key player used, then use at least 1 player from this group. So I'm saying if I've got Justin Herbert in the MVP spot, require at least 1 of these pass catchers in the flex spot. I'm also going to give boost to the rest of the pass catchers. Typically, if I've got Justin Herbert at MVP, I would prefer to have multiple Chargers pass catchers, because if he's throwing it too much to one receiver, given the scoring structure where the receiver scores more points than the quarterback on every passing play, there's a good chance that receiver outscores him. So typically I prefer, if Justin Herbert's in the MVP spot, he is spreading the ball around a little bit, and I prefer to have multiple Chargers pass catchers in the flex. All right, so this is how I'm going to set it up. Gave a 12% boost to each of the wide receivers, tight ends, 4% to running back. Nothing magical about it. Those are the numbers that I've arrived at after some trial and error. It's not perfect. You don't need to use these numbers. This is just what I use. You know what I did immediately the first time I won 6 figures in a DFS contest? I converted my trial membership to Stokastic, awesome at the time, to a full annual subscription. That's because I knew these were the best tools in the industry. That was 2019, and they've gotten even better since then. Well, good news. You can get access to these same tools without winning 6 figures first with a great offer from BetMGM. You can get 2 months of Stokastic Plus Platinum when you sign up, deposit, and bet at least $10. That's every tool on the site for every sport other than Fantasy Cruncher, a $240 value. All you need to do is click the link in the description of this video, follow the steps, and deposit $10 or more, and place a bet of $10 or more on whatever you want. And when that bet settles, MGM will hit you up with how to get your subscription to Stokastic. You don't even need to win the bet. On top of all of that, you also get bet insurance on your first bet up to $1,000. That means if you win the bet, you win the bet. You get the money. If you lose the bet, you still get your money back in site credits. It's a great deal from BetMGM and a long trial subscription to the best DFS tools out there. The legal age for gambling in most states is 21 plus, and if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Reminder, make sure you use the link or use promo code PLATINUMSUB or we won't be able to track you. All right, now I'm going to create a Trevor Lawrence MVP group. And Trevor Lawrence in the MVP spot, make him my key player. Add all of these Jaguars pass catchers to a secondary group. Going to include the running backs here. You don't necessarily need to. They're not all that involved in the passing game. Travis Etienne has run fewer routes the past 2 weeks than JaMychal Hasty has. So JaMychal Hasty a little bit more involved in the passing game, given that he's on the field a lot less. He's running a lot of routes when he's on the field. But I'm going to include them. Again, it's debatable whether you should. I'm going to leave this group once again this same way. So similar to Justin Herbert, both Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert do have some rushing upside, so you don't necessarily need to force in multiple pass catchers. But still, if they're in the MVP spot, I would like to have at least one. And I'm going to give boost to the pass catchers to make it more likely that I get to multiple quarterback in the MVP spot. And same thing, just going to give smaller boost to the running backs. That'll do it for that group. And then I'm going to create groups for each of these quarterbacks in the flex. Starting with Justin Herbert, going to find him in the flex, make him my key player, and then add all of these Chargers pass catchers to the secondary group. And now, because I've got Justin Herbert in the flex, I can add all of these Chargers pass catchers in the MVP spot to that secondary group as well. Typically, you don't need to worry about on FanDuel. If a player doesn't project all that well, probably not going to be ever optimal in the MVP spot anyway. So I'm just going to find a few and yeah, probably don't need to add any of these guys. They don't actually project well enough that they're going to end up in the MVP spot anyway. And I'm just going to leave this group exactly as is. All I'm saying here is if I have Justin Herbert in the flex, I want at least one Chargers pass catcher somewhere in the lineup. I think that's a reasonable group to say. You don't necessarily need to set this group. You could run Justin Herbert naked on FanDuel in particular because there is no PPR. It's a little bit more likely that the quarterback from a team is optimal without any of their pass catchers. But I think it's still more likely if Justin Herbert's in the lineup anywhere, he's probably bringing along a pass catcher. So I'm going to require it in my lineups. And Trevor Lawrence, same thing. I'm going to make the same lineup. I think it's even more. You could certainly have Trevor Lawrence in there without any pass catchers, but I am going to require one in lineups that have Trevor Lawrence in the flex. So I'm going to find Trevor Lawrence in the flex, make him my key player. And then once again, add all of these Jaguars pass catchers to the secondary group. And now, because I've got Lawrence in the flex, I can add all these Jaguars pass catchers in the MVP spot as well. All right, that'll do it. So all I'm saying here, if you've got Trevor Lawrence in the flex, require at least one Jaguars pass catcher somewhere else in the lineup. All right, so I'm going to save this. Now I'm going to crunch out 150 lineups. And sometimes I'll go back and change those settings. Oftentimes I leave the settings just as they are right now, and all of the rest of my work is just looking at the lineups, making sure they correlate well enough, and then looking at my player exposures, making sure I'm getting to about how much I want of different players. So looking at these lineups, first one I see here, Justin Herbert in the MVP spot. I only required one pass catcher. I got multiple most likely because of the boost that I gave them. So I like this lineup. We've also got Trevor Lawrence with Trevor Ingram. Lineup looks great. Second lineup we see here, Trevor Lawrence in the MVP spot with just one pass catcher. So again, I allowed this intentionally. I typically would prefer to have, more often I think I'd like to have multiple pass catchers when I have Trevor Lawrence in the MVP spot, but I intentionally did not require it because Trevor Lawrence does have some upside on the ground. He does like to run a little bit. So I think this is definitely a viable lineup. It'd be perfect if Trevor Lawrence scores a rushing touchdown in particular. This lineup is definitely viable. So looks good enough. Here we've got Allen in the MVP spot with Justin Herbert. Lawrence with Evan Ingram looks good. ETN in the MVP spot. Then we've got Herbert with multiple pass catchers. These are all looking good. Trevor Lawrence with Evan Ingram. That's beautiful. Say Trevor Lawrence throws 2 touchdowns to Evan Ingram. Ingram's outscoring Lawrence on both of those touchdowns. Certainly plausible. And then, Justin Herbert, on the other hand, spreading the ball around. Definitely a viable lineup. This one looks okay to me. Herbert with multiple, Lawrence with multiple, including Travis Etienne, who's not all that involved in the passing game, but he, at least is at least a little bit involved. So I think that's a good lineup. In general, I would say I'm happy with the way these are looking. A lot of these Trevor Lawrence MVP lineups don't have multiple wide receivers or tight ends. They end up with a running back in there as well, which maybe not ideal if it keeps happening in all of them. Yeah, Travis Etienne here. Let me look at those in particular. So we've got 30 of these lineups. First one, just one pass catcher. Second one, only one excluding running backs. How many do we have to go before we find one that has multiple wide receivers or tight ends? Yeah, so really not getting any that have multiple. Here's one, Kirk and Evan Ingram, probably best. And here we've got Justin Herbert with just Joshua Kelly. So not loving these correlations, to be honest. Here we've got, okay, here's a good one. Trevor Lawrence with Zay Jones and Evan Ingram. Justin Herbert with DeAndre Carter. I'm almost inclined to remove the running backs, or maybe remove ETN from the Trevor Lawrence MVP group, just because I would prefer to pair him with other receivers. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that, actually. I'm going to go back to my Lawrence MVP group, remove ETN, and then maybe also give a slightly bigger boost to these pass catchers. Chargers pass catchers with Mike Williams out as of today suddenly look better point per dollar. So it kind of makes sense that I'm not getting to a ton. But if I've got Trevor Lawrence in the MVP spot, I think I'd prefer, multiple pass catchers. So I want to at least have some lineups that look better with Trevor Lawrence and multiple pass catchers. So maybe I'll try. Actually, before I go back and change things too much, I just made some changes, but oftentimes if I just change my player exposures, I will solve the problem without having to change things in the settings. So I'll go up here and look at, all right, in the quarterback spot, getting a ton of Justin Herbert. So 77% plus 20%. So Justin Herbert currently in 97% of my lineups. Trevor Lawrence in just 61%. All right, you can see here, not getting too much Austin Eckler. So this is the second part of my process. Is just make sure the lineups correlate well enough, which currently they're so-so, not my favorite correlations. But then the second part is just making sure I'm getting to exposure levels that I like for different players. I go on position by position, looking through the players. Austin Eckler, 6.7%, probably not going to be happy with that number. So I'm going to give him a little bit of a hefty boost here. Michael Hasty where he is. Joshua Kelly, these seem like reasonable numbers. Travis Etienne, 35% looks good. All right, getting to a lot of Keenan Allen. Not getting a much Christian Kirk, so maybe I'll give Christian Kirk a little bit of a boost because I don't think I want just 1% Christian Kirk. Get into a good amount of Josh Palmer. Not getting as much Zay Jones. Maybe I give him a little bit of a boost. Sure, I am sorted. Yep, I'm going to sort by salary here. I can actually, if I want closer to the amount of Josh Palmer that I have to get above this 9.78 projection on Zay Jones because he's more expensive. All right, getting to a lot of DeAndre Carter. Makes sense. He got a boost with Mike Williams out. A little bit of Marvin Jones. That looks fine. Maybe I want some Jamal Agnew in my lineups. Maybe I'll get him above that 3 number. Maybe Michael Bandy too. He's now the wide receiver 4 for the Chargers. Just get him above that 3 threshold. And then tight ends. Yeah, looks good. Evan Ingram, 33%. Gerald Everett, 21%. I do like Donald Parham quite a bit, especially at 5,000. We're going to have to see what the ownership comes in at tomorrow, but I think I'm going to have some interest in Donald Parham here. Trey McKitty, less so. Maybe Dan Arnold. I don't know if I'm going to want these guys in my lineups, but I'll get them at that 3 threshold to get them at least potentially in there. Probably have more interest in Michael Bandy, so I'm going to get him a little bit higher. I do as well. Kickers getting to 19%. Riley Patterson getting to 0 of Dicker the kicker. Maybe I want a little bit there, so I'm going to give him a boost. See where they come out at, and then defenses not getting much. Maybe I give them a little boost. Again. And again, I'm not going to go through, my entire process, which can be pretty time consuming. I'm just kind of trying to show you the general process, which is looking at the lineup. So again, I'm seeing Trevor Lawrence in the, let's go right to those lineups. Trevor Lawrence MVP lineups. I made adjustments. So now Travis Etienne can't be the only pass catcher. Okay, I'm liking these better right away. Trevor Lawrence, with just Evan Ingram here, it's fine. Lawrence does have some rushing upside. This is certainly viable. I like this one better. Lawrence with Etienne and Ingram. Okay, here's the first one that has Trevor Lawrence without Etienne as one of multiple pass catchers. So we've got Lawrence with Kirk and Ingram. Looks good. Herbert with just Josh Kelly. Honestly, not my favorite thing, but maybe okay. Like this one. Lawrence with Zay Jones, Dan Arnold. Herbert with Keenan Allen. Looks good. Lawrence with Kirk and Zay Jones. Herbert with Parham. Okay, this is probably my favorite one so far. Lawrence with Ingram and Agnew. Herbert with Keenan Allen. These all generally look pretty good. Starting to at least look a little bit better in terms of correlation, and then go through the positions once again, getting to a ton of Justin Herbert, not enough Trevor Lawrence. Maybe that's enough. 49% seems fine. Running backs, still not getting to much Austin Eckler. Maybe I want a little bit more there. Getting to plenty of Travis Etienne. I don't know, is that plenty? 13. He's at 20. I'm getting 23%. He's 12.5. Against this Chargers defense. Maybe I want a little bit more. Hasty, Joshua Kelly. Honestly, not sure how much I'm going to want of these guys, but I'll probably want some. It's gonna end up depending on how much the field gets there. But I'm guessing there won't be a ton. So I'll have interest in. I'm guessing JaMychal Hasty and Joshua Kelly are going to be low owned, and if JaMychal Hasty's not getting much ownership, I will have interest, I think. All right, so still not getting much Christian Kirk at all. 20% Zay Jones, 8% Marvin. So this is why we're running into the issue of all of my Trevor Lawrence lineups don't have many pass catchers, just don't have many Jaguars pass catchers in general. So I'm going to give a little boost here. All right, we'll leave it at that. Maybe more for Agnew. A little bit of Evan Ingram, a little bit of these tight ends that I don't even know if I want them in my lineups, to be honest. But for now, I'm going to include them. I might end up removing them tomorrow. We'll see. Donald Parham maybe wanting a little bit more. Really do like him. He's going to be low owned. Oh, and Gerald Everett. That's I'd like more than Gerald Everett. And crunch again. All right, so first lineup, Trevor Lawrence with just Chris Manhertz. Again, not sure how much actually. Let's see how much I'm getting. 8% Chris Manhertz. I don't think I'm going to want that much, but we'll see. 6% Dan Arnold. All right, let's look through real quick. Once again, we'll look at these Trevor Lawrence MVP lineups right away. Just Manhertz, then Kirk and Zay Jones, Herbert with Parham. Okay, I like that lineup. Trevor with Ingram, Herbert with a couple. Looks fine. Trevor with Kirk and Zay Jones, Herbert with McKitty. Interesting. Is that the same lineup as above with McKitty instead of Parham? Yes, it is. That's fine. Trevor with Ingram and Hasty. Herbert with Allen. Looks good. Kirk and Ingram. Josh with Kelly and Herbert. That's fine. So they're getting a little bit better. I might need to adjust my groups a little bit, try and give bigger boosts to some of the pass catchers in my Trevor Lawrence MVP lineups, but they are starting to look okay. It might just be honestly the price. He is 1,500. Herbert projects so well that it's kind of forcing both of them in, and then it's kind of a price issue. So it's harder to get to some of those pass catchers for the Jags and still have a lineup that projects well. I think is the issue here with Christian Kirk being 13.5. Yeah, it's just hard to want to get multiple pass catchers given the price tags involved with the Jags, whereas it's easier in those Justin Herbert MVP lineups because with Mike Williams out, the pass catchers are so easy. So you look at these ones, they all look a lot better. Naturally, you're going to get Justin Herbert with Keenan Allen and DeAndre Carter, Justin Herbert with Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, Gerald Everett. These ones naturally are going to correlate better because the pass catchers in general, just getting more, they project better, point per dollar. So might need to do a little bit more to force in some better lineups with Trevor Lawrence in the MVP, but maybe not. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, I already moved ETN from the equation. Trevor Lawrence does have rushing upside. Maybe it's totally fine that I'm just getting one pass catcher in these lineups with Trevor Lawrence at MVP, but probably going to have to keep crunching, making sure I'm not getting into more of the Chris Manhertz and Dan Arnolds of the world than I would like to have. So anyway, that's I'm not going to go through the whole process here. This is all I do. I look at the lineups, I adjust as I go. It's all trial and error. Usually all I'm doing is going here, looking position by position, changing player projections until I get to exposure levels that I like. And I look at obviously the single game tool at Stokastic, the primary tool I use to determine how much I want of various players. But that's all it is, changing projections until I get to amounts that I like. And then, occasionally I will go and say, okay, these correlations still not working out, even if I get to exposure levels I like, I come back to my groups and I will adjust here. Like if it's particularly these Lawrence MVP lineups, I might come back and just change these boosts a little bit higher to get more of some of these other pass catchers. But that's all the process is, a lot of trial and error until I get to lineups that look well and exposure levels that I like on different players. Anyway, that's the process. Hope you can use this or a similar process to make some money tomorrow night. It's Friday right now. You're probably watching this on Saturday. So tonight, hope you can use this process or a similar process to make some money. Good luck.